Hi, and welcome to the Ladies in Biz podcast, where every week we have guests that are amazing female entrepreneurs. Find out how they got started and grew their business. Discover how their story can help you grow your business. Thanks for tuning in today. Here is your host, Penny Redmond.
Hey everyone, welcome to Ladies in Biz, and we have a great guest today that's going to give us all kinds of information. So entrepreneurs, listen in. Hi Amy, how are you doing?
I'm great. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh,
it's
that's
really
great.
good to be here.
Thanks so much for coming. I should let everyone know that we know each other a little bit as well because we're both members of Grow Your Biz. And so anyway, I kind of know what Amy already does, but I'm really anxious to hear what you have to say to everybody else, not just talking to me. So let me just fill everybody in a little bit about who you are and what you're bringing to the table here today. So you are a work-life success coach, consultant, and a facilitator who's on a mission to engage leaders and teams to create workplaces where everyone thrives. You're committed to the advancement and success of women in organizations, leading teams, and business owners. You're also a co-author of a book, Good Enough, and you're also a founder of your own company and Insight Edge. So that kind of covers it off. There's lots of other stuff. I know you have quite the resume, but I'm going to include it in the notes so people can read in the notes what else you do as well. So Amy, at the very beginning, we start off where I'd like our listeners to have an understanding of how you got started in your business, because we love hearing the stories on what brought you to where you are today. So can you give us a bit of an insight?
I can. It's one of those stories that I won't ever forget. I was teaching at McMaster University in the School of Nursing in the undergrad program, and I went to a career workshop that they were running, and I was contemplating PhD path, or I didn't know what was next in my career, but it was a pretty limited tunnel-like view of what does the organization offer and where do I fit. And I loved my work. This workshop allowed for this reflective, expansive thinking and looking through our lives, my life, what my strengths were, what I love to do, all of that, and had great conversations. It was run by a woman who was also at one time a nurse and was a coach now, an executive coach. And by the end of the session, I was like, I want to do this. Like, I want to do what she's doing. I love this. And I was already facilitating a lot as an educator, but this was different. And I think it just hit me like a full force. It was like, this is it for me. I just love this whole experience of being in a collective, working in a group, expanding people's ideas of what is possible for their lives, for their careers, and doing so with some rigor, with some structure. So it wasn't just a flight of fancy. And I left that. I took the woman her name is Mary Wheeler, and she still remains a close mentor coach for me.
That's wonderful.
I took her up on a 30-minute, free call afterwards. I think my name got drawn out of the hat, which, for me was a sign. So I took the call, and, I said, here's where I am. At the time, I was newly divorced with 4 young kids, working this job at the university. And this seemed like an impossible dream, if you will, at the moment, right? But in this moment in time, that I have a dog and she may chime in. She's very vocal. I apologize. So anyways, I took her up on the call, and she said, well, here's the program that I took. And I still think it's one of the best, but it's in Colorado. I phoned, I got the pricing. I was like, thank you very much. I'll keep you in mind, And she followed up. Mary followed up, which was great of her. And she said, so what happened? And I said, well, it's just not the right time for me. I just can't afford it right now, which is, the first limiting structure of my mind. And she said, did you ask if they had any scholarships? I said, no, I never thought about it. So I did. They did, but it was gone. They phoned me back 3 days later and you said, you won't believe it. This woman can't come. If you can submit all your documentation and your resume and, you know, your why for doing this, you'll be in the pool to be considered. I got it. I got a partial scholarship. I was on a plane 3 weeks later heading to Colorado. I didn't even know what coaching really was.
You know, it's pretty amazing that it seemed like you just fell into it. It was just like the right timing.
I know, I did. It was the right timing. You know, it's like I was ready to listen and to be open to what the opportunity was. I was just in a moment of, I'm just going to go. I don't know what to expect. And I do remember landing there thinking, oh my gosh, I have never traveled alone. Here I am in Colorado. I've never been here. I don't know anybody here. And interestingly enough, Mary also had another colleague who taught at the university with me that I didn't know she taught there because we'd never crossed paths. And she was there. So, and we've now done work together too. I've worked with both of them in different projects. And so it's just been, yeah, I just trusted, you know, it was like a deep go. I don't know how else to explain it. Looking back, I don't know how I said yes. I just know there was something inside me that said, just trust, go.
It's so amazing because you hear that often where it seems to find you rather than you find it.
Yeah. And I do think now that I've been, I mean, that was 2010. So it's been a good while, almost a decade. And initially I felt like I was putting one career over here and stepping into a new professional path. But in fact, the coaching world and the work I'm doing is a full expansion of my original professional training and education as a nurse. You know, it's a different way to utilize the skills. So I've become a what do I want to say? I don't want to say a believer, but I really follow the idea that we're creating a body of work.
That's a nicer way of saying it, but my belief is that we all have transferable skills. And as we go through our lives and we go through different careers and everything, all those skills that we collect are very transferable to any kind of industry.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think I just bump it out by saying body of work because it actually moves beyond skill sets. It becomes around mindset, right?
Oh, yeah.
And expanding how we see things. You know, that evolves over our lifespan as we mature, have more experiences, begin to, you know, take on old stories and adjust accordingly. So there's actually a great book. I'm going to peek around here. Her name's Pamela Slim, and she wrote a book called Body of Work. So it's not my phrase. It's actually a book. But she really identifies, you know, how it's a skill set, but it's also we're creating something that's unique to our unique genius, as Gay Hendricks says in The Big Leap. You know, what is it that we uniquely bring into the world, and how do we keep nurturing that to contribute, to be in service, to expand the number of people's lives we can touch?
Well, so we're going to put in the notes that's Body of Works by Pamela Slim. I'll write that down. So for anyone that's interested, it'll be in the bottom of the notes for the podcast. So it sounds like it's a good book to definitely read and take some notes on it.
Yeah, I think it's just one of many books that helps you see, you know, we're not just about jobs or running a business. We're a human being who has an ever expanding ability to contribute and build skill sets and build mind and expand our mind and our thinking about where we contribute and how we do that.
One of the things that I really admire about what you do as well, Amy, is that you're able to help not only people within big organizations and companies, but also entrepreneurs. So the two different groups that you're able to give them guidance to be able to get them motivated, or not motivated. Well, how would you say it?
I think what I do really is help people get out of their own way, for one, with some limiting thinking and more of a limited mindset, and also to learn how to have the kinds of conversations that build effective teams, that help us build really rich client relationships where they keep coming back. So those are elements of whether you work in a big corporation or whether you run your own business.
I agree. Yeah.
But how they play out may be a bit differently. You know, in an organization, you have many more structures and processes versus a smaller business owner who's, you know, has more creative ability, I think.
Definitely a little bit more flexibility in the
Mhm.
path that they're going, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not chosen for you as much as if you work in a big company. But so do you think right now, like I see a trend right now with a lot of people, especially millennials, that they're in companies, and there seems to be a lot more thought about doing side hustles or doing their own companies. And I think that moving forward, they'll most likely jump into being an entrepreneur much quicker. So if you were one of those people today, what would you want to know? Like, or what would you say to those people?
Well, I mean, I think in some ways I wasn't a millennial, but I certainly experienced that because this business started as a side hustle. You know, I didn't jump from a career to doing this full time. I did it slow so I could continue to maintain my payments for a mortgage while I was learning how to run a business. So I would say, you know, if there's something calling you, if you notice you've got energy and creativity and this idea just keeps looping back, I want to try this, I could do this, try it, just go try it. And keep your day job and ground your assessment that I can do this, you know, build, play, go out with a spirit of play and experiment and try it out, and you know, do some stuff for free if you need to just figure out, you know, do some lunch and learns if it's a coaching, consulting, or marketing kind of opportunity, and hold it with a lightness rather than I got to figure this out. Because if you're already working in a corporate position, you probably already have a lot of responsibility and expectations on you, regardless. So you want to do the side hustle in such a way that it's energizing and not depleting. I think that would be my first.
How did you find time to do both? Like if you were starting out today, like what rules did you have to put in place, or?
Yeah, I think, well, you know, I still had at the time 4 kids at home and they were all involved in activities. So one of the rules in place was just truly my schedule and where I could fit things in. So lunch and learns were definitely something that I did, you know, lunchtime opportunities at the university was great. They gave me some opportunities to add value by running some specific type workshops for different healthcare professionals and leadership positions. So they gave me some opportunity. I was already, I did volunteer work. So I've always volunteered in some capacity. And so offering to some of the organizations that I would volunteer with was another way to begin to stretch my skills and my competency, and also see what's the appetite for this out here, and learn who would actually invest in this, and who it's nice to have, but they're, you know, it's not for them. And I ran, for me, because one of my real interests is also, the word empower is so overused, but it is empower, lift up, support women to really own their potential and move forward to what they want. And I think we have so much opportunity right now. So that's a big part of my work. So I started running women's groups. I just started, you know, cheap, super. I even did a sliding scale, pay what you can, and ran a 6 months women's self-care program. One, to experiment with the content, to practice navigating with a different group and facilitating with a different intention, right? Rather than to teach, but to really coach. And you know, it was a really rich experience and it taught me a lot. So those were some of the strategies that I used.
Well, that's really interesting that you did that. It's a great idea about volunteering.
I think so. And you know, there's another piece to volunteering that and since it's National Volunteer Week, it's probably appropriate to give it a plug. When you're running a business, until you have a really constant flow, if you will, of well-paying, high-value clients, you can get entangled in, I don't have any work. And that mindset can be really debilitating, because it provokes the whole fear, and that has a full body reaction, and it can almost freeze your creative thinking, right? If you're looking at how do I pay my bills, it's pretty hard to be creative. So volunteering actually interferes with the whole fear cycle, because you're contributing, you're in service, it's using your skills again. You begin to regain that sense of ground and confidence for who I am and what I can offer the world.
When did you decide, though, that it was time that you could go out on your own? Because it'd be pretty scary. You have 4 children, you've got a household that you have to organize and keep everyone happy. So when would you ever have said, okay, this is the right time? Was there another sign?
Well, let me tell you, I've had a coach since 2010, okay? Different coaches. I've had phenomenal coaches. And I had a coach at the time, and I still am in the program with the Institute for Generative Leadership, which is looking at organizational transformation using, executive and leadership coaching. But because I was in the program, I had a community of people to have conversations with about some of these deep cares that I have, and the roadblocks, the fear, the anxiety about what the heck am I doing? I don't know anything about running a business. I'm a nurse, for God's sakes. Like that story was pretty loud. So by tapping into this community I had high trust with, and using my coach, I made a decision to say, I need to just try this. I need to give myself this runway, see what I can create, and by this date, I'm going to make an assessment, not do I stop or do I go, but do I need to add a job back in, or do I have enough grounding that I can make this work? Maybe it's not going to be easy, but I have enough traction that I see I can continue. And that was what I did almost 4 years ago, full time.
Yeah, it's a big step. I know that whenever I talk to people about when they've said that they want to do something or become entrepreneurs or have their own businesses, I always suggest that they just put their toe in the water first. And you've given us some examples of how to put your toe in the water and really to get an understanding, because I don't think that you can be effective if you don't have a good plan, a good financial plan at the very beginning, because you know that what your expenses are and you've got to cover them. So you want to be able to know that you can do that before you go and jump right in.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you need to have sort of contingency plans, right? So, if I leave this position and it doesn't work out, what is my next step? Like, don't burn bridges. Because there's many ways to play out your creative strengths. You can be an intrapreneur or an entrepreneur. It doesn't have to be in your own business. And the other piece I want to add too is building collaborative partnerships has been absolutely the reason I've been successful. To find colleagues that I can partner with, to do bigger project work with, making bigger promises to organizations that are bigger than I can deliver on my own. Certainly finding places to subcontract to in the beginning to get, experience, build a reputation, but also to generate income in such a way that, you're not fully responsible for finding all your clients if you're in a direct client service.
I definitely used collaboration as well when I first started out 15 years ago. It's a long time ago, but I do remember it was really just a comfort to know that there was someone there also that you could talk to, and that you were both going into the same path and learning from each other at the same time as well.
Yeah, for sure. And you can add more value when you're more than one too, right? Like you can do more than you can when you're by yourself, because one, you have someone else's creative ideas and their skills. So together, then you can really create something of even higher value than what the client originally asked for.
Well, I also think because I'm in marketing, I actually love having people and other opinions and ideas, because that's where I get my best creative juices.
Yeah.
Because I can feed off what they're going. I'm going, most times my best ideas are one that I didn't completely understand what you're saying, and I came up with something else. And they're going, that's not what I was talking about. But I'm going, but isn't this great?
Yeah, and I think that's the power of a good conversation, you know, and that's where that network of, trusted support is so important, where you can have these kind of, let's just talk this through. And then, as you say, new ideas are spawned that, neither of you had at the beginning of the conversation.
Yeah, and feeding off each other, you do definitely get a lot better ideas.
Yeah, that's actually how the book came about, because I met Ann Day. I was in her newbie group for starting a business because I knew nothing about running a business. And she was running it at the time. And we met for lunch just to get to know each other a little bit. And the book came out of that lunch. I mean, neither of us entered that lunch saying, I'm going in to ask if we're going to write a book together, or I'm going to write a book. In fact, I'd never even entertained writing a book until that lunch. And we left with a commitment to write this book together. So you really never know if you open yourself up to have some of these conversations, what will come out of it.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about your book.
Yeah, so the book's called Good Enough, Embrace Who You Are, Unleash Your Brilliance. And Ann Day, who owns and runs the Company of Women, which is a large women's networking group, we spent 3.5 years in this book, living and breathing this book. So it started as it was going to be a small little book. We were going to talk to maybe 20 women and just find out what holds them back. And it just became a passion project. And the women who showed up in our first 2 focus groups, ironically, many of them had just lost their jobs and were new entrepreneurs because of it, being walked out of organizations, et cetera. And we just felt so privileged and honored to hear the stories of these incredible women that we couldn't stop. We ended up interviewing over 150 women, either in focus groups or one-on-one interviews, because we would talk to, we'd talk to Penny, and Penny would say, oh, well, you need to talk to Susie because she's got a great story about this too. And women showed up so genuine to have this conversation about what gets in the way. And because we set it out from the very beginning that we wouldn't reveal true identities, we'd make, fake names. There's a better word for that, but it's not coming to my head. People showed up, right? They didn't show up to market their business, which was a risk if we used the real names, right? And also it gave women permission to really dive deep with us about what got in their way. And the stories we heard were, I was in awe. I know Anne was. We felt so privileged. And then we did a big survey of over 250 women, an extensive survey. And all of this data became a real narrative for the book. And through the narrative, we found the themes for the chapters. But it was 3.5 years in the making.
Did you find things that you were shocked by, that you didn't see it was an important factor? And all of a sudden, I'm always, even with the podcast and when we have guests, I think I go in sometimes thinking that it's this way, and then all of a sudden they say something else and going, really? Like, I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the biggest thing was, it's not just me, right? It's not just me that gets entangled in feeling not good enough. It's not just me that has this nasty inner critic voice that shows up and just like relentlessly can send me these messages and chirp at me that, want to hold me back and, tell me that, who am I to do that thing? It's not just me that feels overextended and like, why can't I get it together? It's not just me that judges. I judge and compare, and all of these became the themes in the book. But I think what else surprised both Anne and I was the impact that childhood really has, whether good or bad. It really impacts on if you don't take care of it. So if you don't take care of the stories that come from childhood that have impacted on how you see the world and the opportunities you see for yourself, it can continue to interfere with your livelihood and your good life as an adult. So that we learned a lot about the impact of childhood through the book.
I'm a big believer in that, because what happened in your childhood sort of helps you pave the way as an adult. And
Yeah.
make a big difference on your relationships, on your relationship with your husband or partner, or financial relationship, or with relationship with money. It can all come back from when you were just a child.
Yeah, definitely. And the other piece, though, just to make sure that I don't leave it sort of in a heavy note, is the courage that, you know, every single woman, regardless of the story they came with, the courage, the tenacity, the determination to create something different for their lives, for their family, was remarkable. I mean, it was just so inspiring to hear the stories and have the honor to write them.
I think, you know, I just admire women that are willing to share, just like yourself coming on the podcast today and sharing what you've learned in your life and to helping other women. And I don't think, one of the things I'm so proud of is so many women are willing to do that to help other women.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't take much to say, hey, do you want to come on and tell your story so people can learn from you, so they can be successful, or at least then take the leap that they're thinking about, or know that it's possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I really encourage women, if you don't, because I hear this from especially women who are working in corporate or in organizations in which the day is so full with the job at hand.
Mm-hmm.
More so than I hear from women in business. I hear that they are missing a circle of women to connect to have conversations with, where there's high trust, where they can fully show up and say, this is what's really in my way right now, or can we just talk this through? I need to bash this around with somebody, or I'm exhausted and depleted. Like, can we do something together to nourish ourselves? Like, I see women in business more proactive this way, and I'm not sure if it probably is part of the we can create a little bit more spaciousness for this, but we also are out networking and having conversations for the sake of growing our businesses. I think in corporate it can feel quite lonely.
Yeah.
And I also just want to say that that's a generalization. I've never worked in corporate. I only work in corporate as a executive coach or team coach, right? So, or run facilitation. So I don't want to speak as if that's been my experience and I know this, but it's what I listen.
I can confirm it.
Okay.
I was in corporate for over 25 years.
And so what was your experience then?
Well, you know, it was quite different because it was quite a few years ago, but I would say that it was, when you become an executive, it gets very lonely very quickly. And depending on the company, 1 minute, you know, you're talking to people around your coffee table and they're your peers, and the next moment, all of a sudden, they're reporting to you. So the dynamics of your friendship changes right away because you're not able to tell them everything that you're learning because there's confidential things that you know and you cannot share those. So it becomes very difficult, but you figure out who your real friends are in some ways, because then they know and they're happy for you. They're happy that you're going up that corporate ladder. But then when I was there was very few women. I mean, I think in the whole group that would have been over hundreds of people, there might have been 2 women. And that's pretty significant. Mm-hmm. And so it is lonely because you're not part of the men's group and you're sort of all by your lonesome sort of thing. So, and the one thing that was different, because I was also in retailing, so you did do a lot of, you were outside of your office a lot, meeting suppliers and stuff. So you were able to reach out and network a lot more. But if it wasn't in a retail and it was just in a different environment, you definitely need to network. And I mean, if I had it to do it all over again, and if I was in the corporate environment, I would learn to network outside of my business. I think for today, that's really, really important.
I agree. And I think even going past networking is finding that group of women, and I'm just going to say women for now, but of course, if you have men in your life who are wonderful supporters, absolutely, but find that group of women who have your back and will take a stand for your success. You know, they see what you're capable of, and even when you're wavering or feeling like you've missed the mark, they're there to say, you're on the right path, and we're here for you, and you know, let's go for a walk and figure this out together. That may not exist within the structure of where you work. So you need to make efforts to network, to go out and meet new people and find who they are. If it's not your neighbor, then find where they are, where these women are. Recultivate relationships that were once really good for you.
Yeah, and you know, one people that are sort of like-minded was really good. And if they're in a position that's similar to yours, maybe not in the same company, so they're better, can understand. You know, sometimes, especially working in companies, you get very narrow focused and you get caught up on the little things rather than the big picture. So it's always nice to have a friend that reminds you about the big picture, what you're working towards, not today, not tomorrow, but where you want to end up being.
Yeah, and they also see you as a human being beyond just the position or title that you have, which can be one of the trips that we, you know, the things we trip on in a organization, regardless of what's healthcare or corporate. But as you move up, as you're saying, into different leadership type roles, you get seen for the position you hold rather than your entire human being that you are, the entire woman that you are. So you want friends who remind you that you're more than just that position. You're so much more than that position.
And to remind you that you're not just that position, but you have another life. Sometimes, like for myself, I was definitely, I'm not going to say I was a climber, but I was definitely wanted to do very well. Not so much to get to the next position, but because I always loved doing very well. Whatever I did, I wanted to be very proud of it. But I think the other part is remembering that you've not only got work, it's also your other part of your life. So you don't get so narrow focused. You know, when you're having a very difficult time, to remember that you still have family, you still have friends.
Yeah, and you still have other interests, you know.
And I think volunteering is a great way, especially if you're in a big company. Volunteering is wonderful because it does provide you with a different interest, and you feel good about giving back. You
meet people who have, you know, values that align with yours too, your core values, because they're there, you know. And so I've met some incredible people through all the volunteering opportunities. Yeah. In networking, I guess people for networking, they could, if you were a millennial now, where would you start networking? Well, I mean, there's meetups. I think that's one. I think it's just, you know, you can do industry focused networking, or you can look bigger. You can look at, if you're a woman, looking at, you know, women networking groups that maybe have, and look who's attending, you know, what's the audience? Is it tend to be established businesses? Does it tend to be corporate? Does it tend to be, but do something different. Like if it's a networking group that's in your industry, start there, but then look for other ones too that get you, as you're identifying, you know, more expansive, thinking about, wow, I know, you know, I know nothing about the film industry, I'm going to go to that one, or I know nothing about healthcare, I'm going to go to that one, or a tech, whatever. But I always find when you go to something that's completely different, it's just so energizing, and when you're energized, you also tend to attract more conversations. The other thing is, I think continuing education classes are also another alternative. Absolutely. Yeah. You're going to meet people if you're furthering your education and you need certain skills. The people that are there in those classes are there for the same reason. So I remember making great friends when I was continuing my education and when I first got started. And those people were great. They were great connections. They were great at networking. Yeah, I think that that's an excellent point, because as you're talking, of course, I'm like, yeah, so much of my my collegial network is from my coach training programs. I mean, not only have I worked with them, and there's a group of us that actually started a company together. So for larger projects, we work together. But they're also tremendous. They have friends. They're supportive. So yeah, I think continuing ed or new professional development opportunities are a wonderful opportunity to meet people.
And the other thing that we weren't as likely to do years ago was to find a coach. When we're in business, and this is the most wonderful thing about entrepreneurs, understand you have to have coaches. You need them. You have to have someone come in and help you because you don't always see it the right way. Mm-hmm. But people that are entrepreneurs, it's never been a thing to have a coach. And I think that's finally changing, where they understand that they too need to have a coach.
Yeah, and I mean, I get it, because as I said, when I went off to my first coach training program, I had no idea what a coach was. I just knew I liked that experience I'd had, and I wanted to check it out. And it was by being coached that I began to appreciate what the value is to have an observer listen to your story, whatever your narrative is, and ask questions that make you think differently, and sometimes offer, different framing of things so that you see possibilities rather than roadblocks.
And sometimes friends will won't always give you something that you may say something that you want to hear, but maybe not what you should be hearing. And I think coaches come in with it saying that I'm going to help you and I'm going to consider all factors.
Yeah, and coaches also, a good coach will believe that you have all the wisdom you need to move forward in your life. What you need is someone to ask you the questions to pull out that wisdom that you have, and that knowing that you have already, and identify the hidden roadblocks that are holding you back, be it the inner critic, be it a strong emotion that shows up when you're about to take an opportunity. There's different ways a coach will listen and say, interesting. Did you hear what I heard? Because this is what I hear. Tell me more about that, and dive deep so that you can get at sustainable transformational change. I'd say in organizations, I'm seeing a trend to inviting coaches in to participate more in their change and developmental space. I believe it's been more for like executives until recently. Now I'm seeing more movement to say, well, we want to make an impact as a company. We want to make all this rapid change. Well, how do we help people transition successfully and have the necessary skills, conversational skills, self-awareness to show up and manage the change rather than become reactive during change. So coaching also helps see where we have reactive tendencies that get in our way of, really being a good leader, a good manager, and a good contributor.
Well, I think as corporations, it's harder to keep millennials. Like, I don't want to say all millennials because it sounds like just saying they're all the same.
Yeah.
And I just think, and I don't even think it's millennials. I actually think everybody today that's in a workplace thinks this way. So it doesn't matter what age you are, that you want to feel valued, and that you want to be, hopefully that your opinion is important. And I think that's just, I'm not explaining it very well, but I think the fact is that you need to have someone else now come into the company to help them with that, because when you're an executive, you don't always have time to listen to what people really need. And not that I'm saying that you don't value them, but you don't have the time like a coach to be able to sit down with them and see what is the barriers. And just like what you went over, the other thing is when you're an executive, you've gone up that executive ladder because you're good at making money, probably, most likely. Mm-hmm. And so you probably don't even always have those skills.
Yeah, that's it, exactly. When you get promoted, and this happened to me in healthcare too, you get promoted to a leadership position, and because you're an expert at what you do, you're good at delivering in a certain scope of skills, and suddenly you're thrown into leadership where you're leading people. It's not just about your expertise. It's about how do you help people get the results now? How do you hold bigger promises and commitments to the bigger scope of the organizational work? And those skills are often left to figure out. And rather than anticipating, oh, this is a growth move, we need to support this person to help them develop these conversational and leadership skills. So that's a really, really good point. I wanted to just comment too on what you said about people wanting to feel valued. You know, there's been so much talk about engagement and the engagement numbers being just, disappointing, and it's been at all-time lows for workplace engagement. But the newer research that's coming out talks about the desire for people to belong, to feel they belong to something, along with adding value. And I think when we can start to have more conversations about how do we create workplaces where people actually feel they belong to something that matters, that's contributing, we're going to see a shift in attrition, in burnout, in engagement.
Isn't that something like, I know when I first started, I was with one company for over 20 years. And so I would say I was loyal. But I was loyal to them because I did believe I belonged to something.
Yeah.
I believe I was part of this group that was going to bring this company and make it very successful.
Yeah, and you belong to a future, like you shared a future with them, right? You saw a future and you saw yourself in it. And I have to say too, me too, Penny, like in healthcare, like I worked at Sick Kids for about 12 years in ICU there. And there wasn't a minute I didn't love my work. And I felt I belonged to something. I belonged to a group of people who shared a care, who shared a future. And the same when I taught at the university. In all of my work, actually, I did some time in public health. In all of my work, I've always felt connected to that care and that I belong. And I think probably because that's what drives me to, that would probably be in my decision-making around accepting a position. So maybe that's a pearl of wisdom we're coming up with here to think about if you're in a place to be looking for work or picking a side hustle or whatever. Pay attention to that care that you have, what really matters to you, and is belonging part of that?
Yeah, you're going to make a difference. Yeah, and then you can go home and feel like you've achieved something and, your day was worthwhile.
Yeah, it gives much more meaning to know that we're taking care of what we care about than just completing tasks.
Yeah.
I mean, there's tasks within that, but to have that bigger sense of connectivity and belonging to something. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, it's interesting that, I find that, we learn so much and we go through trends and stuff like that, but belonging to something resonates with me a lot. And I'm so glad you brought it up because I think it's just sort of, it brings clarity to me.
Yeah, and I think it's a missing conversation actually in organizations, in many. I think I really, from the work I've had so far, and again, just my experience, in many places, it's a missing conversation.
Oh, yes, we have. And I mean, if you're an executive and you don't have those skills, then that's going to be a problem. And that's when you start losing people. That's when it costs the company so much money to find somebody and then to train them. Everybody knows it's really expensive to be able to try to replace someone. And who was it the other day? Said to me, there's a shortage of good people out there right now that have the skills, certain skills in certain areas. And so it's even more important that you try to really help the people that are in your company.
Yeah, and I think there's probably not a shortage of good people. I think there's probably a shortage of people who have the skills to have conversations that build commitment and build belonging and help people contribute in a way they feel valued. I think that's missing, or an area to grow. I think there's lots of good people who just aren't having that exposure to the type of leadership that brings those conversations about. I had another point and it just like floated away. It's gone, and maybe it'll come back.
It'll come back. It'll come back. Where were we? We were talking about belong to something.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be our new word for 2019.
I think it really matters. I think it matters for a good life because, I know what I was going to say. I think one of the challenges is what we've come up with this way of looking at being a human being and work and labeled the skills that are necessary to create belonging and create commitment and take care of futures that organizations, small business people care about is we've labeled these things as soft skills, almost like they're trivial. You know, the soft skills of emotional intelligence or social intelligence, the soft skills of being able to give good feedback, the soft skills of being able to have really effective team conversations that produce care, commitment, and results. These are not soft. I mean, they give the impression that they're trivial by labeling them that way. And I think these are the essential skills. I mean, these are the skills that create futures, that create outcomes.
Absolutely. I look back from when I was, I had lots of people reporting to me, and I'm thinking it's pretty scary that they were considered soft skills back then, and companies didn't pay for you to learn those skills. It's amazing. They give you, $60 million portfolio to take care of and 25 people that are reporting to you, and because you're a master at, making money, but you don't take care of the people. And because it's soft skills and you're not trained in that.
Yeah, and I actually think it robs organizations of their humanity. Oh. And when you feel like you're not being seen as a human being, but only as a widget or a deliverer of an outcome, you become disconnected. And I think that's reflected in these engagement numbers and things like that. And I also think that's why so many women in particular are leaving corporate to start their own business, because they see a better way.
I totally agree with you. Absolutely. I think again, I also think that comes back to respect, and that they have a family and that they've got to be more flexible. And, women, in my mind, whenever I loved having women work with me, because I always knew that if they took an afternoon off because they needed to bring their child somewhere, they more than made the time up. I never, ever had to worry about that.
Yeah.
Very conscientious. Yeah. And I'm not saying men wouldn't do that either, because they definitely would, but I saw it more so because women have so many other demands on their life, because normally they are responsible for children as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I think women also have for, 8,000 years been held back from expressing a lot of their, and I'll call them feminine powers and feminine energy, which is a way of leading, communicating, being with people that's different than the masculine. And most of our organizational structures come from the masculine paradigm, and they don't make space for the feminine. And I think now we're finally seeing, either by women leaving to side hustle, to start a business, or to try to change the landscape within an organization. I think there's a deep need for the feminine, which men possess too, but the structures have only included the masculine for so long.
I do see a change, though. I absolutely do see that there's a little bit. One of the things I think is the biggest part about it is recognition that it's required now, where it was never recognized before.
Yeah, and I think men and women are craving it, right? They're craving connection with one another. They're craving authentic conversations and not to be treated like machines.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So I think we're running out of time. So one of the questions I love asking our guests is if they have one thing that they want to share with all women, all our listeners, what would you want to be able to say to them?
One thing. Okay. I want to say something that is really about this journey of running a business, or this experience of running a business, is much more about becoming who you need to be to run the business, to have a business, to put yourself out in the world in such a way that you can add value, be in service, create a product, deliver to a client. All of these things require us to pull ourselves up and create new stories about who we are and what we're capable of. And it's that growth journey. It's who I'm becoming in doing this work that to me is the richest part of this whole experience, and to enjoy that, and then surround yourself with women like yourself who are here to stand for your success.
Yeah, that's wonderfully said. I couldn't say it better. Yeah, one of the things for sure, I'm a true believer is that most women don't realize what they can do in life. There's, and that was one of the reasons why Ladies in Biz started, was to be able to show other women that you can do it. Don't hold back. You can do it.
Yeah. And you don't need to do it alone.
No.
Like, you don't have to put your head down and figure it all out and then ask for help. Ask for help before you figure it out.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. So one of the things at the end too, Amy, is we like making sure that people know how they can connect with you and how they can reach out. So what is the best way that they can reach out and maybe have a bigger conversation than this?
Yeah, I mean, the best way probably is LinkedIn. That's a great way to reach me. Or email me directly at amy@amyvodarek.com. And let me know what you'd like. Would you like to have a conversation? Did you enjoy the podcast? Is there something that I mentioned that you want to learn a little bit more from? Let me know.
Yeah, a good conversation, because I bet you lots of people have other opinions about this as well, for sure.
I'm sure that it could spark some really great conversation.
Well, speaking of LinkedIn too, we'll be posting the notes to our podcast on LinkedIn as well under Penny Redmond. And
Okay.
So they'll be able to read parts of it. I just do just sections of it so that they can, if there's certain subjects that people want to listen to, they can just go in and sort of zero in on it. So that'll be available on LinkedIn as well.
Great.
A little bit on Twitter, a little bit on Instagram, a little bit on Facebook.
Well, that's definitely your sweet spot, is knowing where and how to post all that stuff.
Oh, well, hopefully we have more listeners every week, especially when we have great guests like you that are able to share such magnificent information for us. And I really appreciate you coming on, Amy. Thank you so much.
Total pleasure.
Okay, you take
Total
care.
pleasure.
Have a good day.
You too. Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Ladies in Biz. Send us your comments on ladiesinbiz.com. We would like to hear from you.